A Delta Force operator opens his truck door in a whiteout blizzard, and his heart stops. A little girl lies dying in the snow, clutching a puppy that isn't moving. Her lips are blue, her fingers white as bone. She looks up at him with fading
Please
eyes
save
and
him.
whispers words that shatter him.
Don't let him
Save
freeze.
Scout first, not herself.
It's too cold.
The dog. He has maybe 60 seconds before hypothermia takes them both. He's survived 20 years of combat, faced down warlords and terrorists, but nothing prepared him for this. He might only be able to save one, and she's begging him to choose the puppy. Before we begin, tell us wherever in the world you're watching from, because we like to know how far our stories travel. And if this story touches your heart, please subscribe for more. The Montana wilderness doesn't forgive. When a blizzard rolls down from the Rockies with winds that strip flesh and temperatures at 30 below, you're just fragile meat trying not to freeze. This January night, they called it the blizzard of the decade. Roads closed, towns locked down. Anyone with sense was huddled by a fire. But Marcus Kane wasn't just anyone. The Montana wilderness doesn't forgive. You need to understand that right from the start. This isn't some postcard version of winter with gentle snowflakes and cozy cabins. This is the kind of cold that turns your breath to ice crystals before it leaves your mouth. The kind of wind that doesn't just push against you, but hunts you down like a predator. And on this particular January night, the mountains were showing their teeth. Marcus Kane knew this. He'd been briefed on weather conditions that would kill most men in a dozen different countries. Afghanistan, Syria, the mountains of Pakistan where the cold cuts through Kevlar like it's tissue paper. But here's the thing about Montana in January during what they were calling the blizzard of the decade. It didn't care about his training. It didn't care that he was Delta Force. It didn't care that he'd survived. Situations that would break most people's minds just hearing about them. The storm didn't care who you were. It just wanted you dead. Marcus was driving his late brother's truck, a 2015 Ford F-250 with over 200,000 miles on it, but an engine that ran like it was blessed by some kind of mechanical god. His brother David had maintained this truck the way Marcus maintained his weapons, with precision, with care, with the understanding that when you need something to work, it better damn well work, because your life might depend on it. David was gone now, 6 months in the ground after a logging accident that shouldn't have happened. A widow-cut safety cable, a moment of inattention, a half-ton of Douglas fir that fell the wrong way. Marcus had been in Yemen when he got the call. He'd made it back for the funeral, but he'd been too late to say goodbye. Too late to tell his little brother that he loved him. Too late for any of the things you think you'll have time to say until suddenly time runs out. That's why Marcus was here. 3 weeks of leave. The first real leave he'd taken in 2 years. He was staying with David's widow Sarah and their 2 kids in a small town called Whitefish, about 40 miles south of the Canadian border. Sarah was holding together the way military spouses hold together, with grace and steel and a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes anymore. The kids were trying to understand why Dad wasn't coming home, and Marcus was trying to figure out how to be an uncle instead of an operator, how to be present instead of always scanning for threats, how to be human again. It wasn't going well. Tonight he'd needed space, needed air, needed to not see the photos of David on every wall and remember all the years he'd chosen the mission over family, chosen the call of duty over birthday parties and Christmas mornings and just being there. So he'd told Sarah he was going into town for supplies, which was true, but mostly he needed to drive, to be alone with the storm and his thoughts and the particular kind of silence you only find when you're moving through a hostile environment. The blizzard had hit around 7 p.m. By 8, the highway patrol was advising everyone to stay off the roads. By 9, they were screaming it. The wind was gusting to 70 miles per hour. Visibility was measured in feet, not miles. The temperature had dropped to 28 below zero, and that was before the wind chill. Smart people were home. Smart people were safe. Marcus had never been accused of being smart about things like this. He was on Route 93 heading north back toward Whitefish. The road was a narrow two-lane that cut through dense forest on both sides. The kind of road where if you went off, you'd hit a tree before you even realized you were sliding. His headlights carved a weak tunnel through the white chaos. The wipers were working overtime and still losing the fight. Snow was accumulating on the windshield faster than they could clear it. He was doing maybe 20 miles per hour, both hands on the wheel. Every sense heightened the way they got heightened in a combat zone. He could feel the truck wanting to slip, could feel the wind trying to push him into the oncoming lane, could feel the weight of the storm pressing down like it had physical mass. His training was a constant presence in his mind. Assess, adapt, survive. The road conditions were deteriorating. Visibility was near zero. He should find shelter, should pull over and wait it out. But he was only 15 miles from town, from Sarah's house, from somewhere warm and safe. He could make it. He'd driven through worse. That's what he was telling himself when he saw it. At first he thought it was a trick of the light, a shadow in the snow, maybe a deer or an elk that had wandered too close to the road. But something made him slow down. Some instinct that had kept him alive in places where hesitation meant death. He eased off the gas, let the truck slow, to a crawl, and that's when his headlights caught it full on. A shape. Small. Dark against the white. Wrong. He hit the brakes. The truck slid a few feet before the tires caught. He threw it into park and reached for the high-powered flashlight he kept in the center console. Military grade. Bright enough to blind someone at 50 yards. He flicked it on and pointed it through the windshield. And his heart stopped. It was a child. A little girl collapsed in the snow on the shoulder of the road, maybe 20 feet ahead. She was curled into a ball. No coat, no hat. Just a thin pink sweater and jeans that were crusted with ice. Her hair was dark and matted to her skull. Her skin was pale. Deathly pale. The kind of pale that meant hypothermia was already setting in. But that wasn't what made Marcus's blood turn to ice water in his veins. She was holding something, clutching it to her chest with both arms. A small shape that was moving, barely. A puppy. A German Shepherd puppy that couldn't have been more than 8 or 10 weeks old. Marcus didn't think. Thinking was for planning operations and analyzing threat matrices. This was pure instinct. He grabbed his heavy winter coat from the passenger seat, threw open the driver's door. The wind hit him like a physical blow. It tore the breath from his lungs and sent needles of ice into any exposed skin. The temperature was easily 30 below with the wind chill. Maybe colder. At these temperatures you measured survival time in minutes. He ran. His boots sank into snow that was already past his ankles. The wind tried to push him back, but he'd run through worse. He'd run through Fallujah under fire. He'd run through the mountains of Afghanistan carrying a wounded teammate. He'd run through hell itself, and this was just cold, just wind, just a storm. He reached her in seconds that felt like hours. Up close it was so much worse. She was 7, maybe 8 years old. Her lips were blue. Actually blue. Her eyelids were heavy and flickering. Her breathing was shallow and rapid. Classic signs of severe hypothermia. Her fingers were white where they clutched the puppy. The puppy itself was shaking violently. Its eyes were closed. Its breathing was barely visible. Marcus dropped to his knees in the snow. Hey, sweetheart, I'm here. I'm going to help you. Her eyes opened. Just a crack. Brown eyes, huge and terrified and fading. She looked at him, and he could see her trying to focus, trying to understand if he was real or a dream or something worse. Please. Her voice was barely a whisper, thin as paper. Please save him. Marcus blinked. I'm going to save you both, but we need to move right now. No, She clutched the puppy tighter. "Save him first, please. Save Scout." And that's when Marcus felt something break open in his chest. This child was dying. She had maybe minutes left. Her core temperature was dropping. Her organs were starting to shut down. She was sliding towards the final sleep. And she wasn't asking him to save her. She was begging him to save the dog. "I'm going to save both of you." His voice came out rougher than he intended. "But you need to let me pick you up, okay? We need to get you warm." She tried to nod, but the movement was sluggish. He could see her fighting to stay conscious, fighting to keep her eyes open. He shrugged out of his heavy winter coat and wrapped it around her tiny frame. She weighed nothing. 40 pounds, maybe. 40 pounds of freezing child and dying puppy. He lifted her as gently as he could. She whimpered. The puppy let out a weak sound that was barely a whine. Marcus turned and ran back towards the truck. The wind fought him every step. The snow was deeper now. The storm was getting worse, but he'd carried injured teammates through worse terrain. He'd evacuate civilians through active war zones. This was just cold, just distance, just survival. He yanked open the passenger door and climbed in with her still in his arms. The truck's heater was blasting. He'd left it running. The interior was warm, blessedly warm. He kicked the door shut, and the wind's howl became muffled. Distant. He laid her across the bench seat as carefully as he could. She was still clutching the puppy. Both of them were shaking violently now. That was good. Shaking meant their bodies were still trying to warm themselves. When the shaking stopped, that's when you were in real trouble. Marcus's training kicked into high gear. He'd been through combat medicine, through field trauma care, through every kind of emergency response the military could teach. This was triage. This was priority of work. This was staying calm when everything in you wanted to panic. He pulled off her soaking wet sweater. Her skin was like ice. Her core temperature was dangerously low. He grabbed a wool blanket from behind the seat. One of David's old camping blankets. He wrapped it around her torso and tucked it tight. Then he gently pried the puppy from her grip. No. She tried to hold on, but her fingers wouldn't work properly. "Scout, please. I've got him, sweetheart. I promise I've got him." Marcus cradled the puppy in one hand. It was so small, maybe 6 pounds. Its body was rigid with cold. Its breathing was shallow and rapid. He grabbed another blanket and wrapped the puppy in it. Then he placed it right back against the girl's chest. "See, he's right here. We're warming him up. But I need to help you too, okay?" She nodded. Tears were sliding down her face now. I tried to keep him warm." "You did good." Marcus's throat was tight. "You did so good. What's your name, sweetheart?" "Emma." It came out as barely a breath. "My name is Emma." "Okay, Emma, I'm Marcus, and I need you to stay with me, okay? I need you to keep your eyes open. Can you do that?" She tried. He could see her fighting, but her eyelids were so heavy. He needed to get her temperature up, needed to get her dry and warm and stable. The nearest hospital was in Whitefish, 40 miles, away through a blizzard that was getting worse by the minute. He could try to drive it, but if he got stuck or slid off the road, they'd all freeze. He made a decision. There was an old ranger station about 5 miles east, just off the highway down a service road. David had taken him there once during a camping trip years ago. It was supposed to be abandoned, but it had a wood stove. It had shelter. It was closer than anything else. He reached for his phone. No signal. Of course there was no signal. The storm was probably taking down cell towers all over the county. He was on his own. Just him and a dying child and a freezing puppy and a storm that wanted them all dead. "Okay, Emma, here's what's going to happen." He kept his voice calm, steady, the same voice he used to keep his team focused during operations. "We're going to a warm place, a safe place. It's going to be okay, but I need you to stay awake. I need you to keep talking to me. Can you tell me about Scout? How long have you had him?" She blinked slowly. 3 days. He was supposed to be a Christmas present, but then everything went bad." "What went bad, Emma?" But her eyes were closing again. He reached over and gently touched her face. "Emma, stay with me." "What went bad?" "Mom's boyfriend." The words were slurred. "He said Scout had to go, said he was too loud. He grabbed him and I tried to stop him, and then he hit me, and I ran. I took Scout and I ran, but it was so cold, and I got lost, and I couldn't find the road, and then Scout couldn't walk anymore, so I carried him, but then I couldn't walk anymore either." Marcus felt fury rising in his chest, white hot and dangerous. Someone had hit this child. Someone had made her run into a blizzard. Someone had left her to die because of a puppy. He forced the anger down, locked it away. Right now, Emma needed him calm, needed him focused. "You're safe now, both of you. Nobody's going to hurt you." He shifted the truck into drive. "I'm going to drive us somewhere. Warm. The road might be rough, but you just hold on to Scout and keep him close, okay? His body heat will help you, and your body heat will help him. You're keeping each other alive." She nodded. Her eyes were still closed, but she was holding the puppy tighter. Marcus drove. The service road was barely visible under the snow. He almost missed the turnoff. But his memory kicked in. David's voice in his head pointing out the landmarks. That lightning-struck pine. That rocky outcrop. The road curved east and the forest closed in on both sides. The truck's wheels spun and caught. He kept it moving, kept pushing forward. The ranger station appeared out of the white like a ghost. A small wooden structure with a peaked roof already buried under 2 feet of snow. Marcus pulled the truck right up to the front porch. He killed the engine and grabbed Emma bundled in her blanket with Scout tucked against her chest. The door to the station was locked, but the lock was old. One solid kick and the wood around the bolt splintered. The door swung open into darkness. Marcus carried Emma inside. It was cold. Not as cold as outside, but still below freezing. But it was shelter. It was out of the wind. It was a place where they could survive. He laid Emma down on an old cot against the wall. She was barely conscious now. The puppy wasn't moving at all. Marcus ran back to the truck and grabbed everything useful. More blankets, a first aid kit, a plastic bin of emergency supplies David had always kept in the truck bed, water bottles, energy bars, a battery-powered lantern, and most importantly, matches and a fire starter kit. The wood stove in the corner looked like it hadn't been used in years, but it was still functional. There was even a small stack of old firewood in a box beside it. Dry, seasoned. Marcus moved with the efficiency of a soldier setting up a forward operating base. He crumpled paper, arranged kindling, struck a match. The fire caught and held. He fed it, carefully. Let it grow. Added larger pieces of wood. Within 10 minutes the stove was radiating heat. He dragged the cot closer, piled every blanket they had onto Emma and Scout. The puppy was so still it terrified him. He put his finger against its tiny chest. There. A heartbeat. Weak, but there. Emma's eyes opened. Just a crack. "Is he alive?" "He's alive. You saved him, Emma. You kept him warm long enough for me to find you. You're a hero." A tiny smile touched her blue lips. Then her eyes closed again. Marcus knelt beside the cot and did something he hadn't done in years. He prayed. To who or what he didn't know. But he prayed that this child would live. That this puppy would live. That he'd opened his truck door at exactly the right moment. That he'd been exactly where he needed to be. The fire crackled. The wind howled outside, and 3 survivors huddled together in the darkness, waiting for dawn. Stay with me, because what happens through this long, desperate night will change all of them forever. And the truth about why Emma was out in that storm is darker than you can imagine. The fire in the wood stove wasn't just keeping them warm. It was keeping them alive. Marcus fed it another piece of wood and watched the flames dance behind the grated door. Outside, the wind was still screaming, still trying to claw its way through the walls, still reminding them that nature didn't negotiate, didn't compromise, didn't care. It had been 2 hours since he'd carried Emma and Scout into the ranger station. 2 hours of fighting hypothermia with nothing but blankets and fire and sheer stubborn will. Emma's breathing had stabilized. Her color was coming back. Not healthy yet, but no longer that terrifying death white. The shivering had slowed to occasional tremors. Her core temperature was rising. Slowly. So slowly, but rising. Scout was tucked against her chest under 3 layers of wool blankets. The puppy had finally stopped shaking about 20 minutes ago. Its breathing was more regular now, deeper. It had even opened its eyes once. Just a brief flutter of dark puppy eyes looking up at Marcus before closing again. But it was progress. It was life winning against the cold. Marcus sat on the floor beside the cot, his back against the wall, his body positioned so he could see both the door and the single window. Old habits. You always maintained situational awareness. You always had an exit strategy. You always watched the angles. Even here. Even now, with just a child and a puppy and a storm that wasn't the real enemy. The real enemy was whoever had driven this little girl into the night. Emma stirred. Her eyes opened slowly. She blinked at the ceiling. At the firelight dancing across the old wooden beams. At Marcus sitting beside her like a guardian carved from stone. Is this heaven? Her voice was small, confused. Am I dead? No, sweetheart. Marcus kept his voice gentle. You're alive. You're safe. We're in an old ranger station. There's a fire. You're warming up. Scout's warming up. Everything's okay. She turned her head to look at the puppy against her chest. Her hand moved weakly to touch his fur. Scout's tail gave a tiny thump under the blankets. Emma's eyes filled with tears. He's alive. You saved him. You saved him. Marcus corrected. You kept him warm until I found you. You protected him. That took more courage than most adults have. The tears spilled over, running down her face in hot tracks. I thought we were going to die. I thought I'd never get to tell anyone. I thought he'd just get away with it and nobody would ever know. Marcus felt something cold settle in his gut. Who, Emma? Who would get away with what? She looked at him. Really looked at him for the first time, taking in his face, his presence, deciding if he was someone she could trust. He'd seen that look before, in villages in Afghanistan, in refugee camps in Syria. The look of someone who'd been hurt, trying to figure out if the next person would hurt them too. You promise you won't send me back? I promise. You promise you won't take Scout away? I promise. She took a shaky breath. His name is Derek, my mum's boyfriend. He moved in 3 months ago after Dad left. Mum was so lonely after Dad went away. She said Derek was nice. He had a good job. He smiled a lot. He brought her flowers. Marcus didn't speak, just listened. Let her tell it at her own pace. But he changed after he moved in. He stopped smiling so much, started getting angry about little things, like if dinner wasn't ready exactly when he got home, or if the TV was too loud, or if I left my backpack in the living room, he'd yell, "Slam doors, punch the wall." She paused, her hand still absently stroking Scout's fur. Mum said he was just stressed, said his job was hard, said we needed to be more understanding. The cold in Marcus's gut was spreading, turning to ice, to rage, but he kept his face neutral, kept his voice calm. Did he hurt you, Emma? Not at first. Just yelled mostly. But then on Christmas Eve, my mum's sister gave me Scout. Aunt Jenna said every kid should have a dog. That dogs teach you about love and responsibility. He was so small, so perfect. I named him Scout because I'd just read To Kill a Mockingbird in school, and Scout was brave, and she stood up for what was right. She smiled at the memory. Then the smile faded. Derek hated him. Said puppies were messy and loud and expensive. Said he wasn't paying for dog food and vet bills. Mom said we'd figure it out, that Scout could stay. But Derek kept complaining. Kept saying Scout had to go. Kept getting angrier every time Scout barked or had an accident. Marcus could see where this was going. Could feel it like an approaching storm. Yesterday, Derek came home early. He'd been drinking. I could smell it. Scout was playing with his rope toy in the living room, making those little puppy noises. You know the ones. Those happy sounds puppies make when they're just being puppies. She was crying harder now, the words coming faster, like a dam breaking. Derek just snapped. He grabbed Scout by the scruff of his neck. Scout yelped. I jumped up and tried to get him back, but Derek shoved me away. He said he was taking Scout to the pound, that they'd put him down because nobody adopts Christmas puppies after Christmas. Everyone's already got their dogs. I grabbed Derek's arm, begged him to stop, and he backhanded me. Marcus's hands clenched into fists. His jaw was so tight it hurt. Mom was at work. Nobody else was there. He hit me hard enough that I fell down. I could taste blood. And he just looked at me with these cold eyes and said if I told anyone he'd say I was lying, that nobody would believe a kid over an adult. Then he walked out the door with Scout. But you didn't let him take Scout, Marcus said quietly. Emma shook her head. I got up and ran after him. He'd thrown Scout in the front seat of his truck. Scout was crying. I yanked the door open and grabbed him, and I just ran. Derek chased me for a while. I could hear him yelling. But I know the woods behind our house. I'd played there 1,000,000 times. I lost him in the trees. She looked down at Scout. I thought I could get to Aunt Jenna's house. She lives in town, about 5 miles through the forest. I've walked it before in the summer, but it started snowing so hard, and it got dark so fast, and Scout was so cold. I tried to keep him warm inside my sweater, but he was shaking so much. Then I couldn't find the trail anymore. Everything looked the same, just white and trees and white and more trees. I walked for hours. My feet went numb. My hands went numb. Scout stopped shaking, and that scared me more than when he was shaking. I finally saw lights, car lights. I thought maybe it was Aunt Jenna, maybe someone who could help. But I was so tired, so cold. I couldn't walk anymore. I just laid down in the snow with Scout, and I tried to keep him warm. I tried so hard. Her voice broke completely. I'm sorry. I'm sorry I couldn't keep him warmer. I'm sorry I wasn't stronger. Marcus moved from the floor to kneel beside the cot. He put his hand on her shoulder. Firm, grounding. Emma, look at me. She did. Those huge brown eyes swimming with tears and exhaustion and fear. You are the strongest person I've ever met, and I've met people who do this for a living. You fought to protect Scout. You ran through a blizzard. You walked 5 miles in freezing temperatures. You kept a puppy alive with nothing but your own body heat and your own will. You are a warrior. Do you understand me? You're a warrior. But I almost died. We almost died. But you didn't. You held on long enough. You survived long enough. And that's what warriors do. They survive. A fresh wave of tears came, but these were different. These were relief. Release. The tears of someone who'd been carrying something too heavy for too long and finally had someone to help carry it. Marcus let her cry. Sometimes crying was the most important part of healing. When she finally quieted, he got up and found one of the water bottles. He helped her sit up just enough to take small sips. The water was cold, but she drank it gratefully. What happens now? she asked when the bottle was empty. Do I have to go back home? No. The word came out harder than Marcus intended. You're never going back to Derek. That's not happening. When this storm clears, we're going to get you to people who can help. Real help. Not people who'll just send you back. People who'll make sure you're safe. What about Mum? That was the complicated part. Your mum needs to know what happened. She needs to know what Derek did. She needs to make a choice about who's more important, you or him. Emma looked away. She loves him. She always takes his side. Then she's wrong, and you deserve better. Marcus meant every word. You deserve someone who'll protect you, who'll believe you, who'll choose you first every single time. Like you did. Emma's voice was barely a whisper. You chose me. You stopped your truck in a blizzard. You could have just kept driving. Marcus felt something crack in his chest, something that had been frozen solid for a very long time. Yeah, I chose you, and I'd do it again. Every time. They sat in silence for a while. The only sounds were the fire crackling and the wind outside and Scout's soft puppy snores. Emma's eyes were getting heavy again. Her body was still recovering, still fighting its way back from the edge. Marcus? She said drowsily. Why were you out there, in the storm? That was a fair question. I was visiting family, my brother's family. My brother died 6 months ago. I've been staying with his wife and kids, trying to help, trying to figure out how to be there for them. Were you and your brother close? Marcus hesitated. Not as close as we should have been. I was gone a lot. Military. I missed a lot of important things, and now I don't get a chance to make it up to him. Emma reached out from under her blankets and took his hand. Her fingers were small and still cold, but her grip was firm. He'd be proud of you, for saving me, for saving Scout. That's the kind of thing brothers are proud of. Marcus's throat was tight. He couldn't speak for a moment. This little girl who'd been through hell was comforting him, was offering him grace he didn't deserve. Thank you. He managed finally. That means more than you know. Emma smiled. Then her eyes closed and she drifted off to sleep, her hand still holding his. Scout stirred against her chest. Stretched, yawned a tiny puppy yawn that showed needle-sharp baby teeth. Then he climbed up to Emma's neck and settled there. A furry guardian, a loyal protector. A bond forged in the coldest night either of them would ever know. Marcus sat there on the floor, his back against the cot, his hand still in Emma's, the fire burning steady. And he realized something that hit him like a physical blow. He'd been dead inside for months, walking around, going through motions, but not really living. David's death had hollowed him out, left him empty. He'd survived 20 years of combat operations. He'd survived things that killed most men, but he hadn't survived his brother dying, hadn't survived the guilt, the regret, the crushing weight of all the moments he'd missed. But this little girl, this puppy, this desperate night in a ranger station in the middle of a blizzard, this had cracked him open, had forced him to feel again, to care again, to fight for something that wasn't a mission or a target or an objective, to fight for life, for innocence, for the simple, profound truth that some things were worth protecting at any cost. The storm raged on, but inside the ranger station it was warm, it was safe. It was 3 survivors holding on to each other and refusing to let the darkness win. It was maybe 3 in the morning when Marcus heard it, a sound that didn't belong. His eyes snapped open. He'd been dozing. Light sleep. Combat sleep. The kind where part of you is always listening, always aware. There it was again. The sound of an engine. distant but getting closer. Marcus was on his feet instantly. He moved to the window and peered through the frost-covered glass. Through the snow he could see headlights, a vehicle, coming up the service road, the same road he'd taken to get here. His mind went into tactical mode. Who would be out here in this storm? Who would know about this ranger station? Who would be looking? The answer came cold and certain. Derek. Emma's mother would have called him, would have panicked when she got home from work and Emma was gone. Derek would have lied, would have said Emma ran away, stole his truck maybe, and he would have convinced her to let him go looking, to let him find Emma first before they called anyone official, before there were questions he'd have to answer. The headlights were closer now, maybe a quarter mile away, coming slow through the deep snow, but coming. Marcus moved fast. He checked the door. The lock was broken from when he'd kicked it in. He grabbed the cot and dragged it farther from the window, farther from the door. He positioned himself between Emma and Scout and whatever was coming. Then he did something he hadn't wanted to do. He pulled his phone from his pocket. Still no signal. But he had something else. A number programmed in for emergencies. A satellite phone number that would connect to his unit. To people who could mobilize, could respond, could send help. He typed out a text. GPS coordinates, a brief message. Officer needs assistance. Child in danger. Armed response authorized. He hit send and prayed it would go through. Prayed someone was monitoring. Prayed help was possible. The engine sound stopped. The headlights went dark. Whoever it was had arrived. Marcus checked on Emma. Still sleeping. Exhausted. Her body too depleted to wake for anything less than an immediate threat. Scout was awake, though. The puppy's ears were up, his head tilted. He could sense the change, the tension, the danger. Quiet, boy. Marcus whispered. Stay quiet. Scout seemed to understand. He pressed himself against Emma and didn't make a sound. Footsteps, crunching through snow, coming toward the door, heavy boots, a man's walk, confident, angry, looking for something he thought belonged to him. Marcus positioned himself, between the door and the cot, his body a wall, a shield. He was unarmed except for a pocket knife. Not ideal, but he'd fought with less, and he was fighting for something more important than any mission he'd ever been given. The door burst open. Snow and wind flooded in. And standing there in the doorway was a man Marcus knew instantly was Derek. Big, maybe 6'2". Heavy build. The look of someone who'd used his size to intimidate people his whole life. His face was red from the cold and from anger. His eyes were wild. I knew it. Derek's voice was slurred. Still drunk. Or drunk again. I knew you'd come here. This was always Emma's favorite hiding spot. She told me about it once. Marcus didn't move, didn't speak, just stood there, a human wall between this man and the child he'd hurt. Derek focused on Marcus for the first time, really looked at him, saw the posture, the stillness, the absolute absence of fear. Who the hell are you? Someone who's not going to let you touch her. Marcus's voice was quiet, calm, the way it got right before violence. You need to leave. Derek laughed, actually laughed. That's my girlfriend's kid. I'm here to take her home, where she belongs. She doesn't belong with someone who hits her, who terrorizes her, who made her run into a blizzard because she was more afraid of you than of dying in the cold. The laughter died. Derek's face darkened. She told you that? She's a liar. She's always making up stories. She's a 7-year-old girl with a bruise on her face that matches your hand. Derek took a step into the ranger station. I don't know who you think you are, but you need to mind your business. Emma, get up. We're leaving. Emma stirred. Her eyes opened. She saw Derek, and the fear that flooded her face was everything Marcus needed to know. She scrambled back on the cot, clutched Scout to her chest. No, I'm not going with you. I wasn't asking. Derek moved forward. Marcus moved too. One step, positioning himself directly in Derek's path. You're not taking her. You're going to turn around. Get in your truck and leave. And if you're smart, you'll keep driving until you're in another state. Because when the authorities get here and they hear what you did to a child, you're going to need all the head start you can get. Derek's hand went to his pocket, pulled out something that glinted in the firelight. A knife. 4-inch blade. Fixed handle. The kind of knife someone carried when they wanted people to know they were dangerous. Last chance. Get out of them. My way. Marcus didn't move. No. Derek lunged. The knife came up in a clumsy arc. Telegraphed. Slow. Marcus had been fighting trained soldiers, actual warriors. This was nothing. He sidestepped, caught Derek's wrist, twisted. The knife fell. Marcus swept Derek's legs and the big man went down hard. Face first into the wooden floor. The impact was solid, satisfying. Marcus was on him in a second, knee in his back. Derek's arm wrenched up behind him in a control hold that was agonizing but not damaging. Yet. Here's how this works. Marcus's voice was ice. You're going to stay right here until help arrives. You're going to answer for what you did. And Emma is never going to have to be afraid of you again. Are we clear? Derek struggled, tried to throw Marcus off, but he was a big guy who'd relied on intimidation his whole life. Marcus was a Delta Force operator who'd put down threats in a dozen countries. It wasn't even close to a fair fight. From the cot, Emma's voice came small but fierce. Scout, get him, boy. And the tiny German shepherd puppy, who'd been silent this whole time, who'd been frozen in fear, launched himself off the cot. All 6 pounds of him. He ran across the floor and latched his tiny needle teeth onto Derek's hand. The hand that had hit Emma. The hand that had grabbed Scout's scruff. He bit down with all the strength his little jaw had. Derek screamed, tried to shake the puppy off. But Scout held on, a tiny warrior protecting his person. Good boy, Scout, Marcus said, and he meant it. Very good boy. In the distance, Marcus heard it. The sound he'd been praying for, helicopter rotors, coming fast. His message had gotten through. His team had mobilized. Help was coming. Emma was crying again. But this time it was different. This time it was relief and joy and the pure, overwhelming emotion of being saved. Really saved. Not just from the cold, but from everything. From the fear. From the danger. From having to go back to a place where she wasn't safe. Marcus held Derek down until he heard boots on the porch, until he heard the voices of his teammates, until hands were pulling Derek up and zip ties were going around his wrists, until Emma was being checked over by a medic, until Scout was being examined by someone who knew how to treat animals, until it was over, until they'd won. And as the sun began to rise over the mountains, painting the snow gold and pink, Marcus stood outside the ranger station and watched the storm finally break, watched the clouds part, watched the light return. He'd come to Montana to grieve, to figure out how to be human again, to find some kind of peace. Instead, he'd found a little girl and a puppy who needed saving. And in saving them, he'd saved something in himself. Something he'd thought was dead. Something he'd thought the war had taken from him forever. Hope. Stay with us because what happens next will show you that sometimes family isn't about blood. Sometimes it's about who shows up when you're freezing in the snow. And sometimes one moment of opening a door changes everything. The helicopter that carried them out of the mountains wasn't like the medevac birds Marcus had ridden in combat zones. This was a Coast Guard rescue chopper. Clean. Efficient. Built for saving lives instead of extracting casualties from hot zones. But the feeling was the same. That sense of leaving chaos behind. Of moving from darkness into light. Emma sat wrapped in thermal blankets between Marcus and a female paramedic named Rodriguez. Scout was in a carrier on Emma's lap. The puppy had been checked over by the team medic who happened to have veterinary training. Mild hypothermia, some frostbite on his paw pads, but alive, fighting. Rodriguez had given him a tiny oxygen mask for a few minutes, and now he was sleeping, exhausted but safe. Emma hadn't let go of Marcus's hand since they'd loaded into the helicopter. Her grip was fierce, like she was afraid if she let go he'd disappear, that this would all turn out to be a dream, and she'd wake up back in the snow, back in the cold, back in the nightmare. "Where are we going?" She had to yell over the rotor noise. "Hospital first." Marcus yelled back. "They need to check you over properly. Make sure everything's okay. Then we'll figure out the rest." "What about Derek?" "Derek's in a different helicopter. With law enforcement, he's not going to hurt you again. I promise." She nodded, seemed to accept that. Then her face crumpled. "What about my mom? Does she know? Is she mad at me?" Marcus felt his chest tighten. This was the hard part, the complicated part. "Your mom knows you're safe. A social worker is going to talk to both of you. Help figure out what happens next. She'll choose him." Emma's voice was flat. Dead. She always chooses him. "Then she's making the wrong choice. And there are people whose job is to make sure you're protected, even when the adults in your life don't do it." Rodriguez caught Marcus's eye, gave him a small nod of approval. She'd seen this before. Seen kids caught between love and safety. Seen the impossible choices that shouldn't have to be choices at all. The hospital was in Kalispell. Bigger than the clinic in Whitefish. Big enough to handle trauma cases. They landed on the roof, and Emma was immediately surrounded by doctors and nurses. Kind faces. Gentle hands. People who knew how to treat hypothermia and fear in equal measure. Marcus tried to stay with her, but a nurse gently redirected him. "We've got her, sir. You did good, but we need to examine her now. There's a waiting room on the 3rd floor." Emma's hand tightened on his. "Don't leave. Please don't leave." "I'm not leaving." Marcus knelt down so they were eye level. "I'm going to be right downstairs. The doctors need to check you over without me in the way. But I promise I'm not going anywhere, okay?" "What about Scout?" "Scout too. He's going to the animal hospital next door. They'll take care of him, and then you'll see him again. I promise." She didn't want to let go, but she was tired. So tired, and the nurse was patient, understanding. Eventually Emma's grip loosened, and Marcus stepped back and watched them wheel her into an examination room. He stood there in the hallway for a long moment. The adrenaline that had been keeping him moving for the past 12 hours was starting to fade. His body was reminding him that he'd carried a child and a puppy through a blizzard, that he'd fought a man twice, that he'd barely slept, that he was human after all. "Mr. Kane?" A voice behind him. He turned. A woman in her 40s, professional clothes, tired eyes, a badge on a lanyard around her neck. "I'm Sarah Mitchell, Child Protective Services. I need to speak with you about Emma." They sat in a small conference room that smelled like industrial cleaner and old coffee. Marcus told her everything. Emma's story. Derek's attack. The run through the blizzard. Finding them on the side of the road. The ranger station. Derek showing up. The arrest. Sarah took notes, asked clarifying questions. Her face remained professionally neutral, but Marcus could see the anger underneath. The frustration. Another kid failed by the system. Another case that had escalated to near tragedy before anyone intervened. "Emma's mother is here," Sarah said when Marcus finished. "She's demanding to see her daughter. She's also saying that Derek was only trying to help. That Emma has behavioral problems. That she runs away sometimes for attention." Marcus felt rage building in his chest. "That's a lie. Emma has a handprint bruise on her face. She has frostbite. She almost died because she was more afraid of going home than of freezing to death. I know. Sarah's voice was gentle. And we're documenting everything. The medical evidence, your testimony, the arrest. But here's the reality, Mr. Kane. Emma's mother is her legal guardian. Unless we can prove immediate danger, we can't just remove Emma from her custody permanently. Derek is immediate danger. Derek is in jail. He'll be charged with assault on a minor, attempted kidnapping, probably more once the prosecutor gets involved. But Emma's mother can claim she didn't know, that she'll protect Emma going forward, that Derek is out of their lives, and unless we can prove otherwise. Marcus leaned forward. So you're telling me that little girl survives all of that, and she might have to go back to a mother who chose a man who hurt her over her own daughter's safety. I'm telling you the system is imperfect, but I'm also telling you I'm going to fight for Emma, and your testimony carries weight. You're military, credible, a hero who saved her life. If this goes to court, that matters. If. Sarah sighed. Emma's mother could voluntarily place her with a relative, could agree to supervised visitation only, could make choices that prioritize Emma's safety. Some parents, when confronted with evidence, when forced to see the truth, they make the right choice. And if she doesn't? Then we go to court, we fight, and in the meantime Emma goes into emergency foster care. Marcus sat back. This was a war he wasn't trained for. He could fight enemy combatants, could plan tactical operations, could survive in the worst environments on Earth, but he couldn't fight bureaucracy, couldn't force a mother to love her daughter more than her boyfriend, couldn't fix a system that prioritized parental rights over a child's desperate need for safety. Can I see her? He asked finally. Before anything else happens, can I see her? Sarah considered, then nodded. Brief visit, I'll arrange it. Emma was in a private room, clean, warm, safe. She was in a hospital gown and her hair had been washed. The color had returned to her face. She looked like a normal little girl except for the haunted look in her eyes. She lit up when Marcus walked in. You came back. I told you I would. He sat in the chair beside her bed. How are you? Feeling? Warm. They said I'm going to be okay. All my fingers and toes work. No frostbite except a little bit on my nose. She touched her nose self-consciously. They said Scout's okay too. He's at the animal hospital getting fluids and medicine, but he's going to be fine. That's good. That's really good. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Emma's face changed, the brightness fading. My mum's here. They told me. Yeah. Does she want to see me? She does. Emma looked away. I don't want to see her. Not if Derek's with her. Not if she's going to make me say I'm sorry. Derek's not with her. Derek's in jail. And you don't have to say you're sorry. You didn't do anything wrong. She thinks I did. She always thinks I do. Marcus didn't know what to say to that. How do you tell a child that sometimes parents fail? That sometimes love isn't enough? That sometimes the people who are supposed to protect you are the ones you need protection from? Emma, listen to me. He took her hand. Whatever happens next, there are people who are going to make sure you're safe. Social workers, lawyers, judges, people whose whole job is protecting kids. You're not alone anymore. But you're going to leave. It wasn't a question. It was resignation. The voice of a kid who'd learned not to count on adults sticking around. You have to go back to your life, to the military, to wherever you live. And I'll be here. With foster parents, maybe. Or back with Mom if she promises to be better. And I'll never see you again. The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. Because she was right. He was on leave. He had 3 more weeks, and then he had to report back to Fort Bragg. Back to his team. Back to classified operations in countries he couldn't name. That was his life. That was who he was. Except something had changed. Something fundamental had shifted during that long night in the ranger station. When he'd held this little girl's hand and promised her she was safe. When he'd watched her choose to save a puppy over herself. When he'd realized that all his training, all his experience, all his missions had led to this one moment, this one child, this one chance to be exactly where he needed to be. "I'm not going anywhere." The words came out before he'd fully thought them through, but once they were out, he knew they were true. "Not yet. Not until I know you're okay." "Really? Really?" Emma's eyes filled with tears. "You promise?" "I promise." A knock on the door. Sarah Mitchell stepped in. Her expression was carefully neutral. "Emma, your mother would like to see you. You don't have to if you're not ready. But she's here." Emma looked at Marcus. He squeezed her hand. "I'll be right outside, the whole time. If you need me, you just say so and I come back in, okay?" She nodded. Scared but brave. Always so brave. Marcus stepped into the hallway. A woman was standing there with Sarah. Mid-30s, thin, worn down by life. This was Emma's mother. Her face was blotchy from crying. Her hands were twisting together. She looked at Marcus with a mixture of gratitude and fear and shame. "You're the one who found her." Not a question. "Yes, Mom. Thank you. Thank you for saving my baby." Her voice broke. "I didn't know. I swear I didn't know Derek would hurt her. I thought she just ran away because she was upset about the puppy." Marcus wanted to believe her. Wanted to think that some parents were just blind, just naive, just trusting the wrong people. But he'd seen the fear in Emma's eyes, the resignation, the certainty that her mother wouldn't choose her. "She needs you to choose her," Marcus said quietly. "She needs you to believe her, to protect her, to put her first." Emma's mother nodded, wiping her eyes. I know I messed up, but I love her. She's my daughter." "Then prove it." Marcus stepped aside. "Go in there and tell her she's more important than any man, than any relationship, than anything, and mean it." She went in. The doctor closed. Marcus stood outside listening to the muffled voices, the crying, the desperate apologies, the promises that might or might not be kept. 6 weeks later, the snow had melted. Spring was coming early to Montana. The valleys were turning green, and the rivers were running high with snowmelt. Marcus was still there. He'd made phone calls, had extended his leave, had talked to his commanding officer about personal circumstances, about needing time, about a little girl who'd saved him as much as he'd saved her. His CO had been understanding, had approved an additional 30 days, had suggested Marcus think about what he wanted his next assignment to be, whether he wanted to keep running toward war or whether maybe it was time to run toward something else. The custody hearing had been brutal. Emma's mother had fought, had promised to do better, had kicked Derek out, had gotten a restraining order, had done all the things the court wanted to see. But Emma had testified, had told her story in a quiet, clear voice, had looked at the judge and said she didn't feel safe going home. The judge had sided with Emma. Temporary custody to her Aunt Jenna, the one who'd given her Scout, the one who believed her, who'd been fighting to get custody for months but hadn't had proof until now. Emma's mother had visitation rights, supervised once a week, a chance to rebuild trust, to prove she could change. Marcus was there for all of it, in the courtroom, in the social worker meetings, in the quiet moments when Emma needed someone who understood, who'd been there, who knew the truth. And today he was at Jenna's house, a small ranch on the outskirts of Whitefish. There was land, space, room for a little girl and a growing German Shepherd puppy to run and play and heal. Emma came running when his truck pulled up, Scout at her heels. The puppy had doubled in size. His paws were enormous, His ears were up. He was going to be a big dog, a strong dog, a protector. "Marcus!" Emma threw herself at him. He caught her in a hug. She felt solid, healthy, real. "You came." "Of course I came. I promised, didn't I? Aunt Jenna made cookies, and Scout learned a new trick. Watch." She turned to the puppy. "Scout, sit." Scout sat, his tail wagging, his eyes bright. "Good boy." Emma produced a treat from her pocket. Scout took it gently. "He's so smart. The trainer says he's going to be an amazing dog." They walked up to the house. Jenna met them at the door. She was everything Emma's mother wasn't. Strong, present, clear-eyed. She shook Marcus's hand. "Thank you for coming. Emma's been talking about this all week." Inside, they sat at the kitchen table, ate cookies, talked about school, about Scout's training, about the garden Jenna was planning for summer. Normal things, safe things, the kind of life Emma deserved. Later, when Jenna took a phone call, Marcus and Emma sat on the back porch. Scout sprawled at their feet. The sun was setting, painting the mountains gold. "Hannah, I have to go back soon," Marcus said quietly. "To my unit, to my job." Emma nodded. She'd known this was coming. "How long?" "A week, maybe 2. "Will you come back?" "Yes, I'll come back, and I'll call, and we'll video chat. And you can tell me all about Scout and school and everything, okay?" "Okay." She leaned against him. "Thank you, Marcus, for everything, for finding us, for staying, for keeping your promises." Marcus put his arm around her shoulders. "Thank you, Emma, for reminding me why any of it matters." They sat there as the sun went down, a soldier and a little girl and a puppy. A family that had been forged in the coldest night, a bond that distance and time and duty wouldn't break, because some promises you keep forever, some doors you open change everything, and sometimes the mission that saves you is the one you never saw coming. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs to be reminded that heroes come in all forms, that courage sometimes looks like a 7-year-old girl protecting a puppy. That family is who shows up when you're freezing. Subscribe to our channel for more stories that celebrate the strength of the human spirit and the bonds that can't be broken. And leave a comment telling us what this story meant to you. We read every single one. May you always have the courage to open the door when someone needs you. May you always choose love over fear. And may you always remember that one moment, one choice can change everything. Amen.